Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Cole Stangler is on the line with us, Paris-based journalist covering labor and politics. His work has appeared in the Village Voice, Vice, The Nation, In These Times, International Business Times, and on this program regularly. His website, colestangler.com. You can tweet him at Cole Stangler. Cole, welcome back to the program.
Great to be back.
So, we had a conversation last week about the French election. Your thoughts on the outcome of this?
Well, this is basically what the polls actually had been projecting for some time now. The two frontrunners, Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen. These are the two frontrunners in the polls. Like I said last time, the big story of the last few weeks in this campaign had been the rise of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, of the left-wing candidate here. And it looks like Mélenchon's rise just came a little bit too late and wasn't quite enough to get him into the second round. He came up with around 19.5% of the vote, coming in fourth, very close behind the third place candidate, and almost qualified for the second round, but did not.
He was sharing Le Pen's skepticism of the European Union, the Schengen Agreement, and the Eurozone, was he not?
Mélenchon ran on not an anti-European platform, but on one calling for reform. His argument is basically that the European structure of the EU and the budgetary treaties prevent France from enacting the kind of public investment that it needs in order to provide for its citizens and have a functioning economy.
And I agree with that, and I think a lot of French people agree with that. If this comes down to Macron saying everything's fine, we're going to stay with the EU, and maybe even continue the austerity programs of Hollande, which are insanely unpopular, and Le Pen focusing all of her effort on basically a French Brexit, I personally think there's a good chance Le Pen can win. Am I just totally out to lunch here?
I mean, I think there's certainly a chance that Marine Le Pen could win. I think you'd be really foolish to not say that. That being said, the polls here, and I know people might cringe when I say that, but the polls here do show Macron with a pretty significant lead.
Yeah, it's almost 30 points, isn't
it? I mean, there was a poll, I think, that showed 60-40 was the latest breakdown that I've seen. So 20 points, still pretty significant. When you think about the Brexit polls that were off, but not quite at the margins we're looking at right now, or obviously the Trump-Clinton race. So it's a pretty comfortable lead, and you also have the majority of the French, if not the entire French political establishment, lining up behind Macron at this point. So basically, Le Pen taking on everyone else. And you know, the other interesting point about this too is the result was actually pretty disappointing for the National Front. For years, they've been preparing this presidential election, hoping to come out in front of the first round, getting the top vote total for the first round, and they actually didn't even beat Macron in the first round. They came up in second with around 21% of the vote, which was much lower than she'd been polling for some time. The idea was to really show here that that the National Front is becoming more mainstream and is the most popular party in France, and that ended up not being the case. That being said, this is also their greatest vote record ever, greatest numbers ever that they've ever done in a presidential race. Important to keep that in mind.
Is Macron going to align himself with any party or a coalition of parties, or is he going to continue to campaign as an independent, assuming that he has? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, he's been running as an independent. He has his own movement that he launched, which coincidentally shares his initials, En Marche, in March, marching forward, and he has his own candidates that he's going to be running in the legislative elections, which are in June. People forget about the legislative elections, which are very important. It's going to be determining who's going to be the parliamentary coalition that's working with the president. And so Macron has been, he's maintaining that he's going to be running his own candidates. But then the question, comes, the question is, how do you have an effective governing coalition if he doesn't have a majority in parliament? In which case, he would have to turn to either the right-wing party, or the Socialist Party, which at this point, it's a whole other story. The Socialist Party had 6% of the vote here, which is it's one of its worst scores ever. Completely devastated.
Wasn't that because they kind of sold out to austerity and neoliberalism under Hollande?
Yeah, it has to do with a lot of people's disappointment in the Hollande administration and what happened. And I think another significant story here on the left is, other than this whole question of the Socialist Party, will it exist even after the legislative elections, is the shift of socialist voters to, sure, some of them abstained, some of them probably voted for Macron, but a significant amount of them went and voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And that's really interesting if you look at the kind of bastions of the left. So the eastern parts of Paris, the suburbs of Paris, working class immigrant neighborhoods of Paris, big cities, Marseille, Toulouse, Lille. These are all places that actually voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon. So we're seeing this shift on the left and towards Mélenchon, away from the Socialist Party, which also raises really interesting questions about what the opposition to France's next president will look like.
Yeah, and what the next election, you know, a few years down the road will look like. It's a it's a fascinating time in Europe and around the world. Cole Stangler, one of the best. Cole, thanks so much for the great reporting you're doing.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. We'll be right back.